6 months after the destruction of the indomitable spirit, the galaxy was at war, but it wasn't the kind of war anyone had expected. Instead of fighting for territory or resources, beings across the galaxy were fighting for an idea, the idea that some things were more important than power. Admiral Yoon Jae-sung stood on the bridge of the human flagship New Horizon, watching the largest fleet in galactic history assemble around him. 50,000 ships from 23 different species hung in space, their crews united by the emotions they had felt through the quantum pulse. Final count. Admiral, reported his aide, General Lim Soo-jin. 12,000 ships from the former neutral worlds, 8,000 from hegemony defectors, 15,000 from the Mordaki rebellion, and 10,000 from species we've never even made contact with before. Yoon Jae-sung nodded, still amazed by what had happened. The quantum pulse had done more than spread human emotions. It had created the first truly galactic alliance based on shared values instead of mutual fear. Any word from the hegemony? He asked. Admiral Vextaran is making his final stand at HFY, Lim Soo-jin replied. Intelligence estimates he has about 5,000 ships left, mostly crewed by species that weren't affected by the pulse. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The hegemony's most loyal servants were now the species that couldn't feel empathy. Artificial intelligences, hive minds, and beings whose brain structures were too different from humans to be affected by the quantum resonance. Set course for HFY, Yoon Jae-sung ordered. It's time to finish what the crew of the indomitable spirit started. On HFY, Admiral Vextaran was preparing for the final battle of his empire. His blue scales had turned pale with stress, and his forearms moved restlessly as he studied tactical displays. The greatest military force in galactic history was bearing down on him, and he had less than 5,000 ships to stop them. Admiral, said his tactical officer, the enemy fleet has dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. They're broadcasting a message. Vextaran activated the communication system and found himself looking at the face of Admiral Yoon Jae-sung. The human admiral was younger than Captain Kim Tae-ho had been, with black hair and determined eyes. Admiral Vextaran, Yoon Jae-sung said calmly, the combined liberation fleet offers you one chance to surrender. Hegemony forces that lay down their arms will be treated according to the laws of war. Those who continue fighting will be considered war criminals. Vextaran's voice was full of rage when he replied, You speak of laws of war? You've destroyed an empire that brought order to the galaxy for 1,000 years. You've infected entire species with your human madness. We didn't infect anyone, Yoon Jae-sung replied. We just showed them what they were capable of feeling. Every being that joined us made a choice to value life over profit, justice over order. Choice. Vextaran laughed bitterly. You used some kind of mind control weapon on them. The quantum pulse was an attack on their ability to think rationally. The pulse carried emotions, not commands, Yoon Jae-sung said. Every ship in my fleet is here because their crews decided that some things are worth fighting for. Can you say the same about your forces? The question hit Vextaran like a physical blow. Most of his remaining ships were crewed by artificial intelligences that felt no emotions at all. They served him because they were programmed to serve, not because they believed in what he was fighting for. You'll never understand, Vextaran said finally. Order requires strength. Strength requires the willingness to do terrible things when necessary. Your human emotions make you weak. Then let's see who's really stronger, Yoon Jae-sung replied, and closed the communication link. The Battle of HFY began at dawn on the planet below. 50,000 ships faced 5,000 in a fight that would determine the future of galactic civilization. But it wasn't really a battle at all. It was a demonstration of what the quantum pulse had taught the galaxy. Ship after ship in the Liberation Fleet moved to protect damaged vessels, even when those vessels belonged to enemy forces. Crews that had felt human empathy couldn't bring themselves to fire on escape pods or medical ships. Vextaran watched in amazement as his own forces began to surrender. Even the artificial intelligences were making calculations about the futility of their position and choosing to shut down their weapons rather than fight to the death. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, the absolute victory is requesting permission to surrender. So is the Iron Fist and the Eternal Dominion. Vextaran realized that his empire was dying not from military defeat, but from the realization that everything it stood for was wrong. The quantum pulse had shown the galaxy that there was a better way to live than through fear and domination. His own flagship, the massive dreadnought Final Authority, was surrounded by enemy vessels that could have destroyed it in seconds. But instead of firing, they were broadcasting surrender demands and offering safe passage for his crew. "They could kill us all right now," his science officer observed. "But they won't, because that's not what humans would do." Vex Terran understood finally what Captain Kim Tae-ho had tried to tell him. The humans' greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their ability to see enemies as people who could be redeemed instead of problems to be eliminated. "Open a channel to the Liberation Fleet," he ordered quietly. Admiral Yoon, Jae-sung appeared on his screen again, and Vexitaran saw something in the human's eyes that he had never expected. Not hatred or triumph, but sadness for all the lives that had been lost. "Admiral," Vexitaran said slowly, "I surrender my fleet and myself to your custody. But I want you to know, you haven't won because you were stronger. You've won because you made us all realize we were fighting for the wrong things." The formal surrender took place on the planet below, in the same chamber where the Hegemony High Council had once ordered the destruction of the indomitable spirit. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to sign the treaty that would create the new Galactic Concordat. The Concordat's founding principles were simple but revolutionary. All intelligent life had value, strength should be used to protect the weak, and no species had the right to destroy another for profit or convenience. Ambassador Park Jin-woo, the younger brother of the engineer who had died on the indomitable spirit, was chosen as humanity's first representative to the new galactic government. At the signing ceremony, he read from a statement that Captain Kim Tae-ho had recorded before his final battle. "We hold these truths to be universal, that all sentient beings are created with inherent worth, that they have the right to live free from fear and oppression, and that those with power have a duty to protect those without it. These rights are not granted by governments or empires. They exist because consciousness itself is sacred." The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy, reaching every world where intelligent life existed. Beings who had never heard these ideas before found them obvious and natural, as if they had always known these truths but had simply forgotten them. 5 years later, Memorial Station was completed at the site where the indomitable spirit had made its final stand. The station served as both a monument to the 47 humans who had died there and as the headquarters for the Galactic Concordat's peacekeeping forces. Ambassador Park Jin-woo often stood in the station's central memorial chamber, looking at the names carved into the walls. His sister Park So-min's name was there, along with Captain Kim Tae-ho and all the rest. Below their names was the inscription that had become the Concordat's motto: 47 humans faced 847 ships and won. They won by teaching the galaxy how to be human. Children from dozens of species came to the memorial to learn about the day that changed everything. They were taught that the greatest victory in galactic history wasn't won with weapons or tactics, but with the simple decision to care about strangers. And sometimes, late at night when the station was quiet, Ambassador Park would swear he could still feel the quantum resonance pulse echoing through space, a reminder that some ideas are truly immortal, and that the measure of any civilization is not its strength, but what it chooses to protect with that strength. The galaxy had learned to be human, and it would never be the same. The quantum resonance pulse traveled across the galaxy in seconds, touching every world where intelligent life existed. It carried with it something that had never been shared between species before: the pure emotional experience of being human. On the industrial world of Mordak Prime, Kreshvor the Unbending was supervising a weapons factory when the pulse hit him. For his entire life he had been taught that strength meant crushing the weak. The Mordaki were a warrior species that valued power above all else. But suddenly Kreshvor felt something completely foreign to his people: the human need to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Images flooded his mind. He saw the bird-like Kethtar trying to save their children from the mining lasers. He felt Captain Kim Tae-ho's determination to stand against impossible odds. Most shocking of all, he experienced the human ability to feel sadness for strangers they had never met. "Stop the production line," Kreshvor ordered, his voice shaking. His workers stared at him in confusion. Kreshvor was known throughout the factory as the hardest supervisor on the planet. He had never shown mercy or kindness to anyone. "Sir?" asked one of the workers. I said, "Stop it." Kreshivor roared. "We're making weapons for the hegemony fleet. Weapons that will be used to murder more innocent species like the Kethtar." Within hours, Kreshivor was leading a revolution against the Mordaki War Council. For the first time in their species' history, the Mordaki began to question whether strength always meant violence. On the far side of the galaxy, the Vashti Collective was experiencing its own transformation. The Vashti were naturally curious beings who loved to explore and discover new things, but their contracts with the hegemony had turned them into scouts for military operations. Zithara the Swift was commanding a Vashti exploration fleet when the Pulse reached her ship. Suddenly, she understood something that human explorers like Captain Kim had always known. That discovery should bring joy, not destruction. She felt the human wonder at finding new life and the human horror at seeing that life destroyed for profit. "Navigation," she ordered. "Set course for home." "We're canceling our contract with the hegemony, Captain," her navigator asked. "But we'll lose our payment for the survey mission." "Some things are more important than payment," Zithara replied, using words she had learned from human minds. "We've been helping them find worlds to strip mine. We've been part of the machine that killed the Kethtar." The Vashti fleet turned away from their mission and began the long journey home, where they would convince their government to break ties with the Hegemony Alliance. Even on the Hegemony core worlds, the Pulse was having effects that Admiral Vextaran had never imagined. On SciFiPrime, millions of civilians, who had never questioned their government's actions, suddenly found themselves feeling emotions they couldn't understand. Yithmar the Loyal was a mid-level bureaucrat in the Hegemony Colonial Office. He had spent his career approving mining permits and colonization rights without ever thinking about the beings who might be affected. But when the Pulse hit him, he experienced human empathy for the first time. He saw files on his desk with new eyes. Each permit represented a world where intelligent life might exist. Each colonization order could mean the death of an entire species. The weight of what he had helped accomplish crashed down on him like a physical blow. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered, staring at a permit to strip mine another inhabited world. Yithmar began leaking classified documents to journalists across the galaxy. Within days, the media had evidence of dozens of operations like the one that had killed the Kethtar. The hegemony's careful image of benevolent leadership crumbled as world after world learned the truth about their methods. Admiral Vextaran watched the chaos spreading across his empire with growing panic. Protest movements were erupting on every hegemony world. Military units were refusing orders. Colonial governors were resigning rather than carry out new mining operations. "What's happening to them?" he demanded of his science advisors. "Why are our own people turning against us?" Chief Scientist Murdoch the Wise studied the data from the quantum pulse with growing amazement. "Admiral, the humans have done something unprecedented. They've somehow transmitted their emotional patterns across subspace. Every being who received the pulse has experienced human feelings directly." "That's impossible," Vextaran snarled. "Emotions can't be transmitted through space." "Apparently they can," Murdoch replied. "The humans call it conscience and empathy. It's the ability to feel pain when others suffer, even if those others are complete strangers. It's what made them broadcast the footage of the Kethtar massacre, and it's what made them stand and fight against our entire fleet." Vextaran realized with horror what he had unleashed. By destroying the indomitable spirit, he had created exactly the opposite effect he had intended. Instead of proving that human ideas were weakness, he had spread those ideas to every corner of the galaxy. The neutral worlds that had been watching the battle were the first to act. Within a week of the ship's destruction, 17 different species announced. They were forming a new alliance based on the principles the human crew had died defending. Ambassador Kitharin of the Neutral Worlds Council made the announcement that shocked the galaxy. "The sacrifice of the indomitable spirit has shown us that there are values worth dying for. We will no longer stand by while innocent species are destroyed for profit. We call upon all civilized beings to join us in creating a galaxy where strength protects the weak, instead of destroying them." Even more shocking was the response from within hegemony space itself. Military commanders who had felt the pulse began questioning their orders. Scientists who had classified species as non-sentient for mining purposes suddenly understood the horror of what they had done. General Yexthan of the Hegemony 4th Fleet was the first high-ranking military officer to defect. In a message broadcast across the galaxy, he said, "I felt what the humans felt when they saw the Kethtar being murdered. I experienced their determination to protect strangers they had never met. I cannot serve an empire that sees such feelings as weakness." One by one, entire hegemony fleets began abandoning their posts, not to join human space, but to join the growing alliance of species who had been awakened by the quantum pulse. Admiral Vex Taran found himself commanding an empire that was falling apart from within. The very act of destroying the human ship had proven everything Captain Kim Tae-ho had said about the power of conscience and empathy. But the most shocking change was happening in human space itself. For centuries, humanity had been seen as a minor species on the edge of galactic civilization. Other races had considered them too emotional, too concerned with moral questions that seemed irrelevant to cosmic politics. Now, suddenly, those same emotions were spreading like wildfire through the galaxy. Species that had never heard of humans were demanding to learn more about their philosophy and their values. Admiral Yoon Jae-sung of the Terran Defense Fleet watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy with amazement. 47 people, he said to his staff. 47 people have changed the entire balance of power in the galaxy. His aide, General Lim Soo-jin, nodded grimly. And now the hegemony will blame us for all of it. They'll say we planned this, that the quantum pulse was some kind of weapon. Yoon Jae-sung looked at the tactical displays showing hegemony fleets still loyal to Vex Taran moving toward human space. Then we'd better be ready for war. A real one this time. The galaxy was awakening to new possibilities, but the old order wouldn't die without a fight. The Task Force Absolute dropped out of hyperspace at exactly 0347. Galactic Standard Time, 847. Ships appeared in perfect formation around the asteroid field, where the indomitable spirit waited. The human vessel looked like a tiny insect surrounded by giant metal predators. Captain Kim Tae-ho stood on his bridge, watching the enemy fleet take positions. His crew had spent 3 days preparing for this moment. Every system on the ship had been checked and rechecked. Every weapon had been loaded and tested. They were as ready as 47 humans could be for the impossible fight ahead. "Broadcasting to all galactic networks," announced Park So-min from her engineering station. "The whole universe is watching now." Admiral Vex Taran's face appeared on the main screen, his blue scales gleaming under the bridge lights of his flagship. Behind him, the bridge crew of his massive dreadnought worked at their stations with cold efficiency. "Human vessel," Vex Taran said in his deep voice, "you have committed crimes against the Hegemony Alliance. You will surrender immediately and submit to justice." Kim Tae-ho stepped forward, his gray hair neat and his uniform pressed despite 3 days of running. "Admiral, the only crime we committed was showing the galaxy the truth. The universe has seen what your hegemony really does to innocent species." "The Kethtar were classified as non-sentient," Vex Taran replied. "Your interference with a legal mining operation has caused unnecessary panic and unrest throughout the galaxy." "Legal?" Kim Tae-ho's voice was calm but firm. "You murdered millions of intelligent beings for mining rights. Children watched their parents die. Families were burned alive in their homes. If that's legal under hegemony law, then your law is evil." Vex Taran's forearms moved in what looked like irritation. "You speak of morality as if it matters in the real universe. Power matters. Order matters. Your human ideas of right and wrong are luxuries that weak species cannot afford." "Maybe," Kim Tae-ho said, "but we'd rather be weak and right than strong and evil." "Then you will die weak," Vex Taran replied. "Surrender now and your crew will receive memory rehabilitation instead of execution. This is your final chance." Kim Tae-ho looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Choi Hee-jin at navigation, her hands steady on her controls. Lee Jong-soo at weapons, ready for a fight he couldn't win. Park So-min at engineering, making final adjustments to systems she had spent 3 days modifying. Bae Min-ho at intelligence, recording everything for the galaxy to see. "Admiral," Kim Tae-ho said, "we are human. We remember. We make others remember. That's why you fear us." He nodded to Lee Jong-soo, who cut the transmission. The battle began 30 seconds later. The hegemony fleet opened fire with a coordinated barrage that should have destroyed the human ship instantly. But tactical specialist Han Dong-woo had spent 3 days studying the asteroid field, and he had found something useful. The rocks contained high concentrations of naturally occurring metals that could block energy weapons. "Into the asteroids," Kim Tae-ho ordered. Choi Hee-jin sent the indomitable spirit diving between massive space rocks, using them as shields against the enemy fire. The ship's small size let it move through spaces where the larger hegemony vessels couldn't follow. Lee Jong-soo fired back with their modest weapons, targeting engine sections and weapon arrays. Each shot was precise and carefully aimed. They couldn't destroy the enemy ships, but they could damage them enough to slow them down. Direct hit on the lead battlecruiser, Han Dong-woo reported. Their main gun is offline. But for every shot they landed, 100 came back at them. The indomitable spirit twisted and turned through the asteroid field, using every trick the crew knew to stay alive just a little longer. Shields at 60%. Park So-min called out as another barrage hammered their defenses. The hegemony ships began moving into the asteroid field, accepting damage to their hulls in order to get closer to their target. Smaller interceptors darted between the rocks, forcing the human ship to keep moving constantly. "They're trying to corner us," Choi Hee-jin said, sweat beading on her forehead as she piloted the ship through an increasingly deadly maze. Kim Tae-ho watched the tactical display as enemy ships closed in from all sides. "How long until your modifications are ready, So-min?" 20 minutes, Captain," she replied, her hands flying over her controls as she rerouted power through damaged systems. "But I don't know if we have 20 minutes. A Mordaki siege ship broke through their defenses, its reality-shearing weapons tearing a hole in the ship's port side. Emergency alarms blared as atmosphere vented into space. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Damage Control Officer Oh Ji-won. "Emergency bulkheads are holding, but we've lost life support in that section." More enemy ships pressed their attack. The indomitable spirit fought like a cornered animal, striking out at anything that came close. They destroyed 2 interceptors and damaged a dozen larger vessels, but it wasn't enough. There were simply too many enemies. "Shields failing," Park So-min announced. "Main power is down to 30%. The ship shuddered as another barrage found its mark. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and several crew members were injured by flying debris. But nobody left their stations. They all knew this was their final stand. "Captain," said Communications Officer Ryu Sang-mi, "we're receiving hundreds of messages from across the galaxy. Ships are moving to help us. Tell them to stay away," Kim Tae-ho ordered firmly. "This is our fight." As the enemy closed in for the final attack, Kim Tae-ho activated the ship's internal communication system. His voice carried to every section of the vessel, reaching all 47 members of his crew. "My friends," he said calmly, "in a few minutes we're going to die, but we're not dying for nothing. The whole galaxy is watching us right now. They're seeing what happens when ordinary people decide to stand up against evil. They're learning that conscience isn't weakness, it's the strongest force in the universe." He paused as another explosion rocked the ship. "Each of you made a choice to be here. You could have run, could have hidden, could have pretended that what happened to the Kethtar wasn't your problem, but you didn't. You chose to stand here and show the universe what humanity really means." Park So-min looked up from her console, tears in her eyes but her voice steady. "Quantum resonance drive is ready, Captain. But if I activate it now instead of using it to escape, I can create a pulse that will carry our final message across subspace. Every being in the galaxy will know what we died for." Kim Tae-ho nodded. "Do it." As the hegemony fleet moved in for the kill, Park So-min activated her modified drive system. Instead of opening a doorway to hyperspace, the quantum resonance created something unprecedented, a pulse of pure thought and emotion that raced across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every being who received that pulse didn't just see the final moments of the indomitable spirit. They felt what the crew felt. They experienced human determination, human compassion, human refusal to surrender in the face of overwhelming evil. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, taking 47 human lives. But their message had already reached the stars. Admiral Vex Terran of the Zephyrian Empire stood before the Hegemony High Council, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of authority. His blue-scaled face showed no emotion, but inside he was furious. The footage from the mining operation had spread across the galaxy in just 6 hours, faster than any previous news story. "Honored counselors," he said in his deep voice, "this human ship has committed an act of war against the Hegemony Alliance. They have interfered with a legally approved mining operation and stolen classified military data." The council chamber was a massive dome floating in space above the Hegemony capital world. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat in floating chairs, their faces showing concern and anger. Counselor Merthak of the Mordaki raised one of his tentacles. Admiral, the footage shows our forces destroying an intelligent species. How do you explain this? The Kethtar were classified as non-sentient by our science teams. Vextaran lied smoothly. The mining operation was completely legal under hegemony law, but the lie was already falling apart. Scientists across the galaxy were analyzing the footage, and it was clear that the bird-like Kethtar were intelligent beings with a complex civilization. Their cities showed advanced engineering, and their desperate attempts to save their young proved they had emotions and family bonds. Counselor Yith Ara of the Vashti Collective spoke up. Admiral, regardless of legality, this footage is causing massive unrest in the neutral systems. 17 worlds have already suspended trade agreements with the hegemony. Something must be done. Vextaran nodded grimly. I agree, Counselor. Which is why I propose that we make an example of this human ship. We must show the galaxy that interference with hegemony operations has consequences. What do you suggest? Asked the council speaker. Deploy Task Force Absolute, Vextaran said. The largest fleet ever assembled. 847 ships representing all 7 major hegemony species. We will hunt down this single human vessel and destroy it completely. The chamber erupted in surprised chatter. Task Force Absolute was the hegemony's ultimate weapon, designed to crush entire star systems that rebelled against their rule. Using it against one small exploration ship seemed like using a planet-killer missile to swat a fly. Is such force really necessary? Asked Counselor Merthak. Yes, Vextaran replied firmly. Because this isn't about one ship. It's about the human disease that ship represents. Humans have a sickness of the mind that makes them care about strangers. They feel sadness for beings they've never met and anger at injustices that don't affect them personally. This disease is spreading to other species who watch their broadcasts. He activated a holographic display showing protest movements on dozens of worlds. Look at this. Beings who have never heard of humans before are now questioning hegemony authority because they saw this footage. The humans call it conscience or empathy. We know it as a dangerous mental illness that threatens the stability of our civilization. The council members studied the data with growing alarm. On world after world, alien populations were demanding answers about the Kethtar massacre. Some were even calling for their governments to leave the hegemony alliance. One small ship, Vexitaran continued, has done more damage to our authority than a rebel fleet could accomplish in years of warfare. We must prove that human ideas are weakness, not strength. When the galaxy sees 800 ships destroy 47 humans, they will understand that conscience and empathy are luxuries that lead only to death. The vote was unanimous. Task Force Absolute would be deployed immediately. Meanwhile, aboard the Indomitable Spirit, Intelligence Officer Bei Minho was studying long-range sensor data with growing horror. Captain, he called to Kim Tae-ho, you need to see this. The captain hurried to Minho's station, where the young officer was displaying a tactical map of nearby space. Sir, I'm detecting a massive fleet movement in the hegemony core systems. At least 800 ships all heading in our direction. Chief Engineer Park So-min looked up from her maintenance work. 800 ships for us? The sensor data confirms it, Minho said. Zephyrian battlecruisers, Mordaki siege ships, Vashti interceptors, and vessels from species I don't even recognize. It's the largest military force ever assembled. Weapons Officer Lee Jong-soo laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Well, I guess we really made them angry. Kim Tae-ho studied the fleet positions. They had 3 days before the enemy force would reach them. 3 days to decide how 47 humans should face the greatest armada in galactic history. Sir, said Navigator Choi Hee-jin, I've calculated several escape routes. If we modify our hyperspace engine, we might be able to reach human space before they catch us. And then what? Kim Tae-ho asked. They'll follow us there and demand that Earth surrender us for trial. Our own government might hand us over to keep the peace, Park So-min nodded sadly. The hegemony has Earth outgunned by 1,000 to 1. Our leaders won't start a war they can't win. There's another option, Lee Jong-soo said quietly. We could run to the neutral zone and hide. Find some asteroid field or empty system and lay low until this blows over. Kim Tae-ho shook his head. It won't blow over. The hegemony is sending 800 ships to make a point. If we run and hide, we prove that human conscience is just cowardice wearing a mask. Every species that watched our footage and felt anger at the massacre will think they were fools to trust human. Emotions. The bridge fell silent as they all understood what the captain was saying. So what do we do? Choi Hee-jin asked. Kim Tae-ho looked at each of his officers, seeing the fear in their eyes, but also something else. The same determination that had made them broadcast the footage of the massacre despite the danger. We stand our ground, he said simply. We make them come to us and we show the galaxy what humans do when we're backed into a corner. Maybe we can't win a fight against 800 ships, but we can make sure our deaths mean something. Any ship that comes to help us will be destroyed too, Minho pointed out. Then we tell them to stay away, Kim Tae-ho replied. This is our fight. We started it when we broadcast that footage and we'll finish it. Park So-min began running calculations on her console. If we're really doing this, I can modify our quantum resonance drive. It won't help us win, but it might let us go out with a bang that the whole galaxy will remember. The captain nodded. Do it and broadcast everything when the time comes. If we're going to die, let the universe watch. Let them see what happens when conscience meets overwhelming force. The indomitable spirit continued its journey toward the outer rim, while behind it the largest fleet in galactic history closed in like a vast metal storm. Captain Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the indomitable spirit, watching the stars through the main view screen. His ship was small compared to the massive warships that patrolled the galaxy's core worlds. Only 47 humans called this vessel home, but they were proud of their work exploring the unknown regions of space. The ship had been traveling for 3 months, mapping new star systems and looking for planets that might support human colonies. Kim Tae-ho was a quiet man with graying hair and steady hands. He had fought in the first wars between humans and aliens, back when Earth was still trying to find its place among the stars. Now at 52 years old, he preferred the peaceful work of exploration. Captain, called Navigator Choi Hye-jin from her station. We're approaching the Kepler 442 system. Sensors are picking up something unusual. Chief Engineer Park So-min looked up from her console. She was younger than the captain, with sharp eyes and quick fingers that could fix anything on the ship. The energy readings are massive, sir. Much bigger than what a natural planet should produce. Weapons Officer Lee Jong-soo frowned at his displays. He was a big man with scarred hands, another veteran of the contact wars. Captain, I'm seeing hundreds of ships in orbit around the fourth planet. They're not broadcasting any identification signals. Kim Tae-ho walked to the sensor station where Intelligence Officer Bae Min-ho was studying the data. Min-ho was the youngest officer on the bridge, barely 25, but his mind was sharp as a laser blade. What do you think, Min-ho? The captain asked. It's a mining operation, sir. But the scale is incredible. They're strip mining the entire surface of the planet. Min-ho's voice was troubled. Captain, there are life signs down there. Millions of them. The bridge fell silent. Strip mining a planet with intelligent life was against every law of the Galactic Accords. The Hegemony Alliance, which controlled most of the galaxy's government, had strict rules about protecting primitive species. Take us closer, Kim Tae-ho ordered, but keep us hidden behind that asteroid field. The indomitable spirit moved carefully through the space rocks, its engines running silent. As they got closer to the planet, the true horror became clear. Massive mining ships were burning away forests and cities alike. The planet's surface was being peeled away layer by layer, and the beings who lived there were being killed without mercy. Dear God, whispered Choi Hye-jin, they're wiping out an entire species. Through the ship's telescopes, they could see the planet's inhabitants. They looked like large birds that walked on 2 legs with colorful feathers and intelligent eyes. The aliens had built beautiful cities that looked like giant nests, with flowing curves and natural materials. Now those cities were being turned to ash by mining lasers. Are you recording this? Kim Tae-ho asked. Every second, sir, replied Min-ho. But Captain, look at the ships doing the mining. Those are hegemony vessels. This operation has official approval. Park So-min shook her head in disgust. The hegemony is supposed to protect primitive species, not murder them for mining rights. Lee Jong-soo checked his weapon systems, though they all knew their small ship couldn't fight hundreds of enemy vessels. What are your orders, Captain? Kim Tae-ho watched the screen showing the destruction below. He had seen war before, had watched good people die for bad reasons. But this was different. This was the systematic murder of an entire species for profit. We're going to broadcast this to every corner of the galaxy, he said finally. The universe needs to see what the hegemony is really doing out here. Sir, Min-ho said carefully, if we break communication silence, they'll know we're here. And if we broadcast evidence of a hegemony operation like this, I know the risks, Kim Tae-ho replied, but some things are more important than our safety. Park So-min began preparing the ship's communication array for a galaxy-wide transmission. It'll take about 10 minutes to boost our signal enough to reach the core worlds, she said. While they waited, the crew watched in horror as the mining continued below. Entire cities disappeared under streams of superheated plasma. The bird-like aliens tried to flee, but there was nowhere to run. Their beautiful world was being murdered for the rare metals buried in its crust. Broadcasting now, Park So-min announced. The signal went out across space, carrying video and data about the massacre happening on the planet below. It would take hours to reach the nearest inhabited systems, but once it did, the evidence would spread like wildfire through the galactic communication networks. All done, Captain, she said. Every major news service in the galaxy will have this footage within 12 hours. But their transmission had been detected. Alarm signals began flashing on Lee Jong-su's console. Captain, the mining fleet is moving. They know we're here. 3 of the massive mining ships were turning toward the asteroid field where the indomitable spirit was hiding. Each one was 10 times larger than the human vessel. Time to go, Kim Tae-ho said calmly. So-min, get us out of here. The ship's engines roared to life, pushing them away from the planet at maximum speed. Behind them, the mining ships gave chase, but they were too slow to catch the smaller human vessel. As they escaped into hyperspace, Kim Tae-ho knew they had started something that couldn't be stopped. The footage of the massacre would shock the galaxy. Species that had always trusted the hegemony would start asking questions. The careful balance of power that kept the galaxy stable was about to be shaken, but he also knew the hegemony wouldn't forgive what his crew had done. They had exposed a terrible secret, and powerful beings didn't like having their secrets revealed. Set course for the outer rim, he ordered, and prepare for trouble. After what we just broadcast, they're going to come for us with everything they have. The indomitable spirit raced through hyperspace, carrying 47 humans toward an uncertain fate. Behind them, the planet continued to die, but its story would live on in the footage they had transmitted. Sometimes, Kim Tae-ho thought, the most important battles weren't won with weapons but with truth.